welcome back. Michael here. I want to talk to you about the Bentwood V63. It's a commercial grinder, not really meant for home, but that's how I'm using it. And maybe you're kind of curious why I am, and maybe wondering how you can make a commercial grinder work at home for yourself. I'm going to just kind of go over the details and how I got here and give a review in the home perspective. Not really going to talk about budget, but it is a factor, and maybe it can help you decide if a commercial grinder is really a good fit, or, you know, there are just home grinders that work well too back there. Let's talk about it. So I'm not going to convince you to buy one. This is kind of a review, but I really just want to tell you about how I got here and why I chose it compared to everything else that's out there. So I started as early as you can think, you know, with a little home Breville plastic espresso grinder. And eventually, you know, I just kind of hit the limits of that. Like, it was inconsistent. The coffee just didn't taste as amazing as I wanted it to, especially compared to shops that I was visiting. So I moved on and I was like, I'm gonna just go all in, and I eventually ended up with like an Anfim Cody Kaimano on-demand whatever grinder. It was a 64 millimeter. I got the titanium coated burrs. It was amazing. It was super loud and it looked cool on the counter, but it was not the greatest grinder for home. But I loved it. It made amazing shots of espresso, especially when it was dialed and I had coffee in the hopper and it had fed enough through and I purged it a lot. So, you know, halfway through the bag, I eventually would get something good out of it. And it really just made me love like a really nice grinder. Later on, I ended up getting the monolith conical, and it was a really great grinder for home use. It was designed to be a single dosing grinder. It had very minimal retention, and honestly at the time it didn't have any retention. I didn't even use RDT. It just worked very well. But after a while I think I wanted clarity, so from there I moved on to the Eureka Atom Specialty 75. I threw in SSP red speed burrs. They're basically Mythos replacements with a little better uniformity. They didn't really have the high uniformity or low uniformity naming on it, but I believe they're like a high uniformity burr set. But even then, with that grinder, it was a little bit of a challenge to get consistent shots. Paired with the Londinium Mini and even the Decent at the time, it didn't do so well to what I wanted for a grinder. I then replaced that with the Monolith Conical 4. Honestly, that's probably the best grinder I've ever had, and I kind of wish it back. Jason, I'm talking to you. And I think that was probably the best grinder. I probably should just go back, so don't even buy one of these. But I'm gonna do, or I did, what I'm sure all of you are probably wanting to do and kind of fell for the same thing, is that I wanted higher clarity and like cleaner, coffee and espresso. So I wanted a flat, and I thought like a flat grinder would solve all those problems. I know it's not 100% accurate, but that was my belief at the time. Oh well. So I sold it and I bought a Bentwood. It was a flat grinder. It was a 63 millimeter grinder, and it's not really that remarkable, because there's a lot of 64 millimeter grinders out there that all spin various forms of 64 millimeter burrs. So why did I choose this? I wanted it to be just a little bit different, and I wanted it to just be a nice grinder that kind of did everything that I wanted out of the box. I didn't feel like aligning it. I didn't want to rip it apart or modify it. That's how I ended up here. And that's only like I didn't really have a budget for a grinder. I just wanted something that worked really well. And this is what I ended up with. So it's not probably the best route that you should take when it comes to espresso. I'll tell you why it really shines for me, and that, you know, it kind of proves its value. So on the Bentwood, it has a button on the front. It's got a lot, and you can set timers on them and everything and dose. So if you had a big hopper, you can have your time dosing and everything. It had a little portafilter holder. There's one out there that I want, but I will probably get it later. It grinds really fast. The retention is an issue. You can either RDT, or I use this thing. This is the Akaya Ion Beam. It's a little overkill for what I need it to do. It just sits pretty conveniently right here and at the spout. So it kind of helps with the retention. There's usually some accumulation in the spout. Maybe a shorter spout would help, maybe not. I've tried the anti-static screen. It's not in there right now. With the anti-static screen, you don't get any of static, but you do get a lot more retention. So that's kind of a problem. And if you take it out, then you get tons of static, which means you have to use RDT or buy a giant device like this. And the workflow that I have is single dose into the grinder. I'll weigh my beans, throw them in there, grind my beans into a little dosing cup. Cavitec, dosing ring, Malkonig, dosing cup fits on top. And then other way around, you can dose like that, easy. WDT and temp, and you're pulling great shots. What really makes it easy for me is I can easily see the micron setting that they have on the top. It works pretty well. I don't know about what it means, or if it's actually calibrated, or if that really is the distance between the burrs as you turn it, but it is a really easy, repeatable number that no matter if I've taken it apart to clean it and put it together, or have switched from filter to espresso, it's always going to be repeatable. And that was something that I always ran into in other grinders, like the Eureka or the Anfam. It was very hard to like go back to exactly that same spot that I had an amazing coffee at. So now I can say, hey, I like this one. It's at 209. And this one pulls amazing at 199. So that is kind of just how I track it. I have like 6 coffees open. So I write the setting, micron setting on the coffee. Maybe if I do filter, I'll write the filter. And it's easy. You turn it, you grind it, and then it's like, oh, I want espresso. You can go back, easy, boom, no problem. That's really amazing for me because I use a lot of coffees. I always have a ton open, and it's hard to remember, or if you have a hopper, to like swap stuff out and purge beans. And even then, sometimes you get coffees that have like 50 grams or so in the bag. That gives you almost 3 shots if you kind of down dose and figure it out. But really only 2 shots to really get it right. And just being able to intuitively like know where I can adjust it and how fine or coarse I can go, and know that that's going to be it, really makes it easy. So dialing in a new coffee, I can just sometimes remember that this is a little denser, or it's a little darker or lighter, and just know that like the best spot's going to be in this range, or this range. That makes it really easy for me, and maybe it will for you, but that's a big factor for me. I switch a lot of coffees, I have a lot open. I want to be able to just know like, oh, that was a 209, let's set it, boom, I'm ready to go. And then for filter, like I was saying, if it's easy, I can just swing it over to the filter range, and now I'm ready to do a pour over. And there's not a lot of retention to purge, probably just a couple that, grounds that were stuck in the chute and from before, but going back to espresso is not that hard either from filter. I think a lot of it clears out faster with a filter setting because it's just coarser, it's not all clumpy. So when you do go back to espresso, it's not too hard to just get a really clean shot on the first go, not have to purge anything. So I waste less coffee. That's a good thing. And one last thing I just want to point out, it's a 63 millimeter grinder, and you're like, why is it so big? Giant motor, it's supposed to be for commercial and just keep things cool and have a lot of airflow. There's a fan in the back. But the adjustment is so wide in circumference that, or in diameter, that making minute adjustments is very easy. It's very nicely dampened, so you can easily just half or a point of a micron, supposedly on this scale, but you can just move it as easily or in small as you need, or large, and it's very smooth that way. Compared to smaller grinders that have a small dial, you have to like hold it and just kind of try to get that little like window of sweet spot that you have in a coffee sometimes. Here, that sweet spot's like right here. I can be like, oh, I just need it 2 seconds longer, you know, there you go. I can dial it in very easy. And I don't have to go around 3 times to go to filter. There, I'm doing a pour over. Go back, espresso, just like that. And I think that was a little annoying on the monolith. It's not a big deal, but there's a little sticker and you have to zero it and then like figure out where your zero is, and their scale was only like so big. And then if you wanted filter, you had to like turn it around, and you had to put a sticker on the back, and then figure out like, okay, that was the filter sticker, but now it's like way off. And it wasn't a big deal, but it was those little things that just help make it a little easier to use and kind of gets out of your way in the morning. So a few warnings on why a commercial grinder may not be good for you. And even for me, it is something that I think about. The first and biggest thing is that it's big and heavy. It's a big grinder. It's super heavy. You have to have a solid counter or brew bar that can support it. If you have to move it, it's kind of annoying because you have to pick it up. I know others have grinders like this, have EKs. It's probably the same problem. But one of the biggest things that I will point out that matters a lot and that you have to really think about when you make this commitment is selling. You buy it, it's going to come in a giant box, you know, tri-wall with double boxing and packaging and all that, and it's a big mess. But one, you have this giant box that if you have to service this grinder, you may have to ship it back to the manufacturer or service center to get help. Luckily, you know, it's a really great grinder, it hasn't broken, it's amazing. And that requires holding onto a giant box. So if you don't have storage in your house to hang on to that, that might be an issue. Or if you get rid of the box, you're gonna pay a lot more in fees to ship it at FedEx or UPS. Find a place for that. If it's in your attic, put it in the attic. Mine's in the garage with all of my other boxes. And that's the other part with shipping. It's expensive. If you sell this grinder, you may be able to get a really, you know, good return on it from use because it's light use at home. You're not putting hours on it at a cafe. But when you do have to ship it, it's still a like 70-pound grinder. I don't know, 65, but the box is probably gonna be like 80 pounds, and that's gonna come with the cost. So you have to factor that in, or try to sell it locally. When you do sell it, you're gonna lose money on shipping. You're gonna lose a little money from use. So it's just something you have to consider, that if you're not happy with it, or if you're kind of tired and bored and want to move on to something else, it's a lot harder to sell a grinder like this. I know there's someone that will buy it, but think about how much work it's going to take, how much packaging is going to cost if you didn't have your box, and how much shipping is to wherever it is in the world that you're shipping it. The other part is cleaning. So cleaning a grinder is supposed to be easy, right? Like you remove 3 screws, you take the top off, you brush it out, and it's clean. It's super easy, especially for home grinders. That's how they make them, to be very serviceable at home, and easy, so you can keep the grinder running flawlessly. For a grinder like this, there is a lot more work to it. I'm not going to show you a video on how to take it apart. You can find those, but it is kind of a process. You have to take the front off, you have to take a few screws off, you have to take this thing off, and then you have to unscrew the whole carrier system here, pull that out, don't lose the bearings. get it all the way in, get some brushes and vacuum and clean that all out, put it on its side and like get into the shoot area and all that. And it's a lot. I haven't cleaned it very often, but when I do, it does take some time, and you have to find a place to lay it down on a table, on a towel or blanket, and like make sure you're not scratching anything or breaking, your floor or table from setting it on there and working on it. So you kind of have to think about if you have a space to work on it, or if your brew bar is open enough that you can get into it. Mine is not. So when I do clean it, I move it to the island and clean it there. It's still a lot of work. I'm okay with that, but think about it. So that's why I like the Bentwood. How I ended up here, I don't know if I have something in the future coming. Maybe I may sell it. But like I said, it's kind of a pain in the butt. It definitely makes espresso amazing though. For myself, with how I use it and the coffees I have and the grinder, the machine that I use that I have paired with it, the Londinium LR24. And that's a very unique combination because you're not going to have the same setup or even want the same results that I have. Even the baskets that you use matter a lot. I'm using an E&B Ultrafine right now, just trying it out. You shouldn't chase a grinder for a certain flavor profile that other people are saying and describing to you, but you should try to think about a lot of the other things that also matter. Because I know I've had some other cheaper 64 millimeter grinders and they do make amazing coffee, but there were so many other flaws about them that I couldn't keep it. Like the DF64, it was very loud, and I know this is loud, but it's a different kind of loud. It's that really high-pitched screeching, and maybe it was the birds that were in there, but even then it just had a few flaws that I wasn't happy with, and I liked a more refined grinder. Just think about why you want it, but also all the other factors that make you love making coffee. And this is a grinder that makes me love making coffee. I love the process. I love being able to grind coffee and smell it, stick my face in the ground, and then eventually, go make an espresso. The product that comes out of the portafilter and into the cup, and just being able to experience all the amazing flavors that coffee can have is amazing. And for me, I'm able to do that with this grinder a little more easy than others in the way that I work. So find a process and grinder that works for you. Find something that meets the goals that you want. And if it's going to be a big honking grinder like the Bentwood, then maybe it is. Thank you for watching me ramble on my journey and why I like the grinder and why it's kind of just a good thing for me. I want to keep talking about other gear that I have and why I chose it and how I ended up there as well. So stay tuned for more, and we'll see where we end up from here. Cheers.